Hello there, my lovely lovelies, and welcome to haQ. Now we're gonna have a look at the Arconeer, but let me just show you one of my most favorite user cases. It's for when your work is done and you get to chill and relax with some gaming. You haven't lived until you've listened to the phrase,
"I used to be an adventurer like you, then I took an arrow in the knee,"
in a pair of correction-tuned attaQ M50s. I mean, I wasn't even sure I was alive until I heard with the studio monitor simulation turn on. Now, even though those jokes aren't very timely and only a small portion of you are gonna get those jokes, mainly the gamers, I still felt it was a very compelling and convincing way of getting you to go buy an Arconeer. And if it wasn't, don't tell me, cause I like being right. Now, whenever I'm reviewing anything from IK Multimedia, I have to disclose that I'm positively biased towards them and their products. I've been using their stuff a lot for over a decade, and I've gotten to know some of the people over there, so we've kind of become friends. Now, they've sent me many things for review, some that I have reviewed in videos and some that I haven't reviewed. But the ARC unit here, they definitely sent me that without charge, and I think I'll be able to keep it, at least I'm hoping so, because I've fallen in love with it. So the elevator pitch for the Arconeer is portable DAC and headphone preamp with headphone correction tuning and studio monitor simulation. In basic layman terms, one of his biggest jobs is to make your studio headphones sound as neutral as possible, while also being able to emulate your studio reference monitors within a studio listening environment at the same time. And from my experience, it does this really, really well. And I feel really confident saying that about the Arconeer because I was basically testing with gear that I've used for a long time. Now we're gonna get into all of that, but before we do, I wanna make sure everybody is on board here. When you are doing pro audio work like mixing and or mastering, then you ideally want headphones or monitors that has a neutral frequency response. Sometimes we call it flat, even though it is physically impossible to get frequency responses to be flat when you're dealing with actual physical elements like speaker cones. But in any case, that's what we ideally want. And it turns out that there are a lot of speakers out there, there are a lot of headphones out there, and all of them have their own frequency response, and they can look in all manners of ways. And here's where correction tuning comes in, because it can counter any flaws in order to bring that to a more neutral, more flat response. So in a curve like this, it would bring these bumps down and this one up in order to make it more neutral. And let me just add that I'm not exactly sure what the tuning profile is doing when you're loading it. I mean, I'm assuming it at least does EQing because it does look like that, but I don't know if it's doing anything more. IK Multimedia hasn't told us. Oh, and by the way, let me just highlight that whatever it's doing in the correction tuning, that is separate from what you can then do with the 3-band equalizer up here. Those are two separate things. Now, once we've selected our correction tuning profile, basically said these are the headphones we have, what we then get to do with the Arconeer is also add a new curve to emulate a pair of reference studio monitors. And then on top of that, the emulation goes further by trying to place those two reference monitors inside an ideal studio environment. Basically, you're getting some kind of a room reflection. I really hope I was able to explain what the Arconeer and its system is trying to do. Now with that said, I'm gonna move on to talking about how I was able to judge whether the Arconeer was doing a good job or not. For my studio headphones, I'm actually using a pair of Audio-Technica's attaQ M50s. I had my original M50s for 15 years before they completely broke down. I had them with me everywhere, so I had to buy a new pair, so the new ones are a pair of M50Xs, but they sound almost exactly the same, except from they don't sound fatigued anymore. They actually sound like a new pair. But I recognize the sound profile really, really well because I use them for everything. I have had them connected to my phone. I use them for my gaming sessions, doing the dishes, listening to podcasts, doing my mixes. And for those of you who are autistic like me, no, I'm not doing all of these things at the same time, of course. But what I'm trying to say is that I really know the profile of these bass-heavy headphones. And yeah, they're very bass-heavy. A lot of studio technicians or engineers wouldn't even call them studio reference headphones because of their bass-heavy frequency response curves. And the aRC does a really good job on correcting this curve to make the headphones sound more neutral. And they do really sound good still, even though they are very bass flat with that corrected curve from the aRC, which is the whole point with the system. But what about this studio reference monitor situation? Well, it turns out I actually own 2 pairs of their reference studio monitors. The first pair is a pair of Mark I MTMs, and the second pair are MMs. Now, I've had the MTMs for over 6 years, and I've had the MMs for about a year. So in the end, I decided to rely on the MTM profile since I've had an actual physical pair since 2019. And I must say that after my tests, I'm quite impressed with what the aRC-on-Ear system delivers, because it really does feel like I'm carrying around my studio reference monitors in my headphones when I'm out and about. It's actually quite wild. Now, with all of that praise, I also need to say that the aRC-on-Ear is not accurately reproducing my listening environment in this studio, in my bedroom, bed over there, studio over here. But what it does feel like is like getting a pair of MTMs in an ideal studio listening environment. And the big thing is that it's all happening inside of my M50s. Now here I want to pause to say that I'm painfully aware that what I'm giving you right now is a very subjective experience, because it's my experience, my hearing, and to me, it does what it's supposed to be doing. It sounds really, really good, even though the emulation of a pair of MTMs in a studio environment isn't really exactly what I have in my studio environment. It's still close enough so that I can rely on it when I'm not in the studio. That is the most important thing, that it does the thing that it says that it's supposed to be doing. So if you expected to get pure data, like a data analysis out of this video, then that's not what you're getting. If you need something like that though, there is another video out on YouTube on the DMS channel. He gives a way more technical review of the aRC-on-Ear. They do measurements and stuff. That's pretty interesting. And also, if you want to see the data being handed out from IK Multimedia themselves, there is this thread that I found over at Gearspace. Last I checked, it was like 6 pages long, and I just checked again, and it looks like it's 10 pages long, and I haven't had time to read it all yet, but there are more topics being discussed in that thread, and it's not only about data, and the data is actually in relation to whether the aRC-on-Ear can supply enough power for certain headphones. And in this case, they're discussing planar headphones, which seems to be power-demanding types of cans. So the discussion is going back and forth on whether the aRC-on-Ear's 200 milliwatts, basically 100 milliwatts per channel output, is enough to drive those headphones. And I can't even test it myself because I don't own a pair of planars, nor am I planning on buying a pair anytime soon. Now, I never felt like I didn't have enough power to power my M50s at least. There was plenty of volume for me to grab at. In the end, for me, none of this stuff really matters too much because I'm still using the same philosophy as I've been using for decades, and that is, whatever sounds good to me works. So, I don't know what to tell you. If we start with the IOs, at the front we have a big 6.3 headphone connector, and on the back we've got a 3.5 analog in. Now the analog in is intended for connecting to mixing consoles and will actually take about 10 plus dBu in before it starts clipping. And if the aRC-on-Ear does detect clipping, it will start flashing the LEDs here on the side rapidly. Now, of course, there's also a USB-C connector here, and this is for connecting to laptop and or desktop computers so that you can use it with the aRC-on-Ear software to configure the hardware. But you can use it for just powering or charging the aRC-on-Ear instead. The unit is small and sturdily built in a metal casing, and it has an easily replaceable lithium battery. You pop 4 screws here, lift the lid, and then you just remove this connection. You can remove that battery. And not only that, the headphone port, if that ever breaks for you, it's just 4 screws and you lift this thing out. Shout out to DMS for pointing this out. I really wish that more companies would build their stuff just like this. I really hope this becomes a trend. So the build quality is really good, and it's easy to just throw it into a bag or even keep it in a pocket. Now, if you do keep it in the pouch that you get with it, you can carry a few cables in there, and then suddenly it becomes more bulky to carry around. If it was me, I'd just throw it into a textile bag of some sort, one of those with a string that you just tighten. Now, I was worried about the power switch and whether it was easy to actually flip it on while you have it in a bag, and it seems to be hard to make it happen. Now, when you are doing portable music and if you are off-grid away from wall power, it's really important to have enough battery power. And I must say that the Arc-on-Ear is a little bit on the low side. 4 hours is not that much, and I do wish that IK Multimedia would have put in a slightly bigger battery in here, and I would have wanted to be at least 6 hours, maybe even 8. So yeah. Then again, you can do that silly thing where you use a lithium battery to power another lithium battery through the USB-C port. It's really silly, it's really inefficient, but it is an option. So portability and build quality good. Now how about setup and utility? Well, here comes my first real complaints with the unit. My biggest gripe with the Arc-on-Ear is the fact that I had to go and borrow a laptop from my partner to even set it up. And I have to mention this because I know that a large portion of my audience are also iOS based, and many of you don't use laptop or desktop computers. But here's the good thing. You only need to set this up once, and you can also store up to 5 profiles inside the Arc-on-Ear. And it's really easy to flip between those profiles directly from the unit without any computer involved once they're stored in there. You see, anything that you do inside the Arc-on-Ear software, which is a free download from IK Multimedia, well, it instantly gets stored inside the Arc-on-Ear unit. So once you turn off the software and the computer, you're basically left with a standalone portable DAC and headphone preamp with 5 different profiles, and you don't have to do it again. And so it's only annoying for a little bit. And I know that a lot of people watching this who are already using laptop or desktop computers you're just gonna roll your eyes and not understand why I'm complaining about this. Well, I've been iOS based for over 10 years. Every video you watch on this channel have all been made on iDevices like the iPad and iPhone, and I just don't use laptop or desktop computers in any of my creative work. And so to me, this is really annoying, the fact that I have to borrow a laptop just to set up my hardware. I hate it, but it is what it is. And yeah, like I said, you only have to do it once. Alright, so utility. There are 3 buttons on the Arc-on-Ear, and they all do different things. You can turn the calibration and also the studio emulation on or off directly from the unit itself, which is really nice. And the FN button is not just for switching presets when combined with the calibration button. When you use it on its own, you can set up a behavior for it. And I usually have it set up for mono stereo switching, so I can easily test out my mixes in a mono mode. And here comes my second gripe with the Arc-on-Ear, and that's the fact that I wish there was more buttons on here, at least one more button, because one of them I like having the stereo mono mode on. The second mode I would want is either a dimming or maybe one of the other things that can be set up here. When you get your Arc-on-Ear, the first thing you do is just register it through the IK Multimedia system, and then you download the Arc-on-Ear software. And once you've got that, make sure that you update the hardware with the latest firmware if it wants to do that, just to have everything work correctly. Once that is done, what you need to do next is to go into the list of headphones and just select the pair that you're using. And here I need to highlight something, because there is something called safe headroom in here. It's basically here to provide you with safe levels for listening to mastered music and to avoid digital clipping. But I would suggest that you turn this off because the ARC unit just works better. It just lets the ARC unit give out more juice to your headphones. Now, as soon as you select the headphones that you're using, it already loads it in with a correction tuning. And if you for some reason want to turn that correction tuning off, you just go over to calibration and flip this switch. And that button is accessible to us through the calibration button on the unit. Now, turning off a section like this will also turn off everything else within that section. That includes the tone control and the phase alignment switch at the bottom. Now, the tone control literally works like a tilt for the filter, and the phase alignment will actually add latency to your headphones to try to correct for the phase misalignment you're getting from messing with all the frequencies here. Now, once you've selected your headphones, you just select the pair of studio monitors that you want to emulate. And when you do that, it once again calibrates the curve so that the output ends up sounding more like the virtual speakers inside a studio simulation. And if you want to turn this off, you can do that from the studio emulation switch. But as you can see, there's also a switch for the virtual speakers. You see, when you are turning off the studio simulation, it will also turn off the virtual speakers. It's the same thing if you use the button on the actual hardware unit. However, you can actually have the studio simulation on and then turn off the virtual speakers individually. But if you want to access that function from the hardware unit, you have to assign the virtual speaker as an on-off switch for the FN button. There's a lot of calibration going on here just from selecting the headphone models and then also adding the virtual speakers on top of that, but it doesn't quite stop there. Now, on top of that curve, you can also then further sculpt the frequency response output by using a 3-band equalizer that you have up here. And you have tools for them, so once you've selected the band, you can select what type of filter it's supposed to be, the type of steepness for the slope, and then you just tweak it around until you get what you want. Now, there's a lot going on in this spectrum view, and if you ever feel lost and you want to know what the output curve looks like, just look for the post curve, which is the orange one. Whatever you're doing here is now being done inside one of the 5 different profiles. To switch to another profile, you just switch over here. And again, whenever you've set something up, whenever you move an EQ point, whatever you're loading in here, it all automatically gets stored inside the ARC on-ear unit. You don't have to press a send to device or anything like that. It just happens automatically. I really like how this works. Now, you can save it all down. Everything you've done inside the app, you can save it down as a preset. Something I haven't talked about is mixing in headphones. Now, it's not an ideal situation to mix in headphones. That's why we use speakers. But if you really can't use speakers, like maybe at all or most of the time, like a lot of bedroom producers, I know what that's like. Well, then you have to rely on headphones, and you're gonna choose headphones that sound good to you. And in my case, I even chose a pair of closed back headphones. Now, those are good for 3 things. Number 1, they will shut out the world, so I don't have to listen to anyone else on the bus while I'm doing my mixes. Number 2, they will shut out my work from the rest of the world, so they don't have to be bothered while I'm doing my mixes on the bus. And number 3, I'm a bass head and I like capturing that bass close to my ear. Now, that isolation is good for those things, but they're really bad for crosstalk. And crosstalk is when the sound from one speaker hits one side of your head, effectively one ear first, and then the other. And with closed back headphones, you're not gonna get this interaction. Now, the audio industry has been trying to think about this, and so they made open back headphones. But now I'm thinking maybe you should stay at home, because bringing those with you on the bus is horrible, because now everyone has to listen to whatever you're doing. So crosstalk isn't really the only thing that open back headphones are trying to deal with, but there's less isolation. However, it's never gonna be like listening to a pair of speakers. And so stereo imaging is always gonna be hard to do inside headphones, and I still think that that is a hard thing to do sometimes when I'm working, even though I've been mixing on headphones for so long. And this is something that the ARC system is now trying to help with through its studio emulation. And I gotta tell you that I am not certain that I'm the right guy to actually give a proper judgment on this. Why? Because I mix more on headphones than I do on speakers. So I'm not so sure that I have a neutral stance here. I would expect that people who mix and master on speakers would have a different opinion, maybe, than I do. All I can say is that, in my opinion, I'm having a better experience right now with my headphones when I'm using the ARC on ear as a go-between. I don't feel like I'm closed in like I do when I use the phones on my own. I had gotten so used to that feeling that when I put the ARC on ear in between here, it's like it's so different. It's just so different. And right now I'm just experiencing that as better. Another thing I really want to press home is the fact that the ARC on ear is a standalone hardware unit. Once you have done your setup with the software, you no longer need the software. It's stored inside the unit. So when you're out and about and got this thing hooked up to a mixing desk through the analog in, you don't need to also have a computer hooked up to it to run the software. And you don't have to worry about accidentally baking in your headphone correction tuning profile into your sound once you're exporting your master. Because this isn't a plugin you got loaded on your master out. This is all happening outside of your desktop/laptop or smart tablet DAW. Okay, so now, who is this for? Well, it's for people who want headphone correction tuning and studio emulation for their headphones while also being out and about. I mean, of course, you can just plug this into USB-C, power it that way, and have it in your studio. And I'm betting a lot of studio music producers are gonna use it that way. While people like me, even though we're a niche group, will be very happy with the fact that we can just pick this up and have it power our headphones while we're sitting and making sounds out in nature. Overall, I am really happy with the performance on the ARC on ear. I find it impressive and surprising how good it actually works and how good it sounds. But I must say that the biggest disappointment so far has been the low battery time, and that's simply because I'm thinking about the mobile aspect. Personally, I recommend this a lot. I think it's a good product. I think it's pretty dope. And there are improvements that could be done with it. But as it is right now, it just does what it says it's supposed to do. It does it well enough from my own tests with my gear here. And I'm super happy. I've put a link down in the comment section so that you can go check out the ARC on ear yourself. Now, before I leave, I just want to say that none of the cows were actually harmed in the obelisk incident, and only the true cow cult followers are gonna know exactly what that means. As usual, I wish you a very productive week. Now go finger all of your stuff and have a lot of fun doing it.